Gentlemen, very nice to see you all again. Thank you for your extraordinary service, and thank you for your leadership during one of the most challenging chapters in the history of this country, at least in the years that I've spent on this earth. My colleagues would tell you, you don't know me well, but my colleagues would tell you I'm a glass half full guy. I take to my heart the words in the Bible, in all things give thanks. Sometimes it's hard to do. The words of Albert Einstein, in adversity lies opportunity. And sometimes that's hard to realize, but this is adversity. God knows this is adversity, and there's got to be some opportunity here as well. I served in uniform, never made it to admiral, made it as far as captain. But what I was, along with the death of John McKean, the last Vietnam veteran, serving in the U.S. Senate. And I like to run down to Lincoln Memorial. I usually go home at night, but I love the run from here down to Lincoln Memorial and back. I always run by the Vietnam Veterans Memorial as well. And there's 58,000 names carved into that stone. And I think about them every time I run by them. That's 58,000 names. We learned this week, I'd say this to Administrator Gain, we learned this week, Pete, that the number of deaths isn't 110,000 in this country. It's 117,000. I just learned that this morning. That's twice as many people have died from this virus as died in the entire Vietnam War from beginning to end. And that war was predicated on an untruth, and we paid a severe price for that. We are in a different kind of war today, and we're in a war that you're trying to help us turn the corner on and turn the tide. And I just want to say that the work that you've described, the efforts that you've described from men and women in uniform, folks who are medical professionals, folks who are in the private sector who fly airplanes and move goods from all across the world, heroic efforts, heroic efforts. We have someone who's really close to our family who's an anesthesiologist, and she's very special to us. She graduated from her anesthesiology training 4 years as about to be an anesthesiologist, and finished last week. For months, she has worked in a hospital intubating people so that they could be placed on, go into a coma, and be placed in a ventilator and hopefully survive. Most didn't. And she's a hero as well, or a heroine as well. There's all kinds of people, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands across the country. And I'm inspired by them. And I'm inspired by the efforts that you described here today. But what I'm not inspired by are these numbers. In a country, in a world where we in the United States have less than 5% of the world's population, we've recorded more than 25% of the world's deaths from COVID-19. I have a friend, you ask me how he's doing, he always says, compared to what? And I'm just going to say, I just want to compare the U.S. to what? And we're at 117,000 and counting. New Zealand, 22. Singapore, 25. Taiwan, 7. Australia, 102. Canada, 7,800. South Korea, 274. Germany, 8,800. Japan, 916. China, and I don't know that I believe these numbers, but with 1.4 billion people, they're reporting less than 10,000 deaths. Even if you double that, it's still only 20. And the thing that I have a hard time getting my head around and understanding is how, by comparison, do our deaths, how do they reach these kind of staggering numbers by comparison to these other nations I just mentioned? And I'm not a real partisan guy, but I'm just going to share with you what may sound partisan, but it's the truth. And I want to use these words from our president. February 28th, 2020, this is what he said. He says, it's going to disappear. One day, it's like a miracle, it will disappear. That was February 28th, 2020. March 6th, the president's words, anybody that wants a test can get a test. That's what the bottom line is. Really? March 6th? Here's March 10th. The same president, he said, this was unexpected, and we're prepared, and we're doing a great job with it. And he added, and it will go away. Just stay calm, it'll go away. March 24th, we've never closed down the country for the flu, so you can say to yourself, what is this all about? And May 20th, when you say that we lead in cases, that's because we have more testing than anybody else. I don't look at that as a bad thing. I look at it as a badge of honor. That just flies in the face of the truth. You've been asked and handed an incredibly difficult challenge, incredibly difficult challenge. And if truth be known, it's because we were really late out of the starting gate, realizing what we faced and addressing it right up front, right up front. A fellow who used to be the head of the General Motors used to say, leadership is staying out of step when everyone else is marching to the wrong tune. Well, the people that you have to lead have had to march a lot faster because of the lack of leadership that we had in February and March into April. So I just want to thank you for a Herculean effort to try to get us out of this crisis finally. And we're not there yet. But because of your efforts, we'll be there someday. A question. When I was a member of the House of Representatives, I co-authored the reauthorization of the Defense Production Act. One of my things I was proud of. And I've followed with interest the role that this administration has played with respect to using the Defense Production Act. But what is the role of this White House? This would be for you, Admiral, and for Administrator Gaynor. What is the role of the White House, if any, in steering Defense Production Act policy in response to COVID? And specifically, what is the role of the President's trade advisor, Peter Navarro, in approving Defense Production Act requests or shaping DPA policy? And I would ask that of Admiral Polachek and Administrator Gaynor, please. Thank you. In that order.
Administrator, I'll go first. Any use of the Defense Production Act, no matter where it may came from. So let me describe a little bit to you. So as I do my work, we figured out that N95 masks were incredibly short supply, relying on Asia. The first action that I put over to the Joint Acquisition Task Force was increase U.S. production of N95 masks. That work came back from the professionals, acquisition professionals at DoD, came back in through the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, whose staff brought it to the Unified Command Group, the UCG, where Administrator Gaynor, Dr. Kadlik, and Admiral Jawah lead that, approved that item, and then sent it to the White House, the NSC, to work through the staffing at the White House. And then it was, again, brief to the White House Task Force for approval. I would imagine that Mr. Navarro is in that management process, but I have no firsthand knowledge of a Mr. Navarro approval of something. It was all approved at the White House Task Force. And I'll ask Mr. Gaynor.
Just a brief response, if you would be.
Yes, sir. I wholly agree with the Admiral's recital of how that process works. That's exactly how it works. There's a function for that. We've used DPA, FEMA, and my other partners 15 times. Title I, Title III, Title VII. All those uses follow that process, and it's pretty straightforward from my point of view.
All right. Thanks very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator